Ricky. I'll check it out right after. Okay. So, welcome to the stream, everyone. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about something that I've been hearing like almost every day on Facebook. There's people arguing about what is the best home for our reptiles. And one of the biggest like debates and arguments is always the bins versus the enclosures. Do we keep them in little bins? Do we keep them in giant custom enclosures? Do we put them in glass tanks? What do you think is the best way to keep your reptiles? So I just want to talk to you guys about that, discuss it, because I think that best home for the reptile is the wild. Okay, so then you get people that say that too. But consider this. When a snake gives birth, it has about 20 babies, okay? And those 20 babies, they wander off in the woods. In the jungle. And what ends up happening is they get eaten by other animals. So all the other animals end up being eaten. So you think about our pets, you know, cats, dogs. If they were born in the wild, their chance of survival is way less. And you wouldn't ever expect a dog to kind of survive in the wild. On the other hand, you would kind of expect a wolf to survive in the wild. But the difference between domestic snakes and snakes in the wild is basically that. When you have a and they don't survive as well. So you have to understand there's a difference between a pet and a wild animal. There's a difference between a dog and a wolf. And when these animals are born in captivity, they're like this. You can see how calm my snake is. If this snake was to be put in the wild, it probably wouldn't survive. First of all, because it's albino. Second of all, because I've fed it, so it's lazy, it's chill. It's not the way a snake in the wild would behave. A snake in the wild would be super fast and quick to get away, whereas a snake that is born in captivity is very calm and not trying to get away because there's nothing it's afraid of. So this animal is really calm and relaxed. So in captivity, some people keep their snakes in bins, and then there's clear bins where they can get a light cycle. There's bins that are not clear where they have no light cycle. There's bins that are too small, and there's bins that are big. So the big thing is that it's a lot more complicated than just having them in a bin versus having them in a tank versus having them in an enclosure, because within bins, if you have a snake like this in a tiny bin, yeah, that's definitely not nice. But if you have a little snake in a bin, it's not the same, because the little bin is bigger for the little snake, whereas it wouldn't be big for a snake like this. When you put reptiles in tanks to me are kind of like the worst enclosure to have your reptile in, because they don't, unless you're somewhere where the temperature is right. So for instance, in Canada here, it gets cold, we have winter. So you take a snake, you put it in a tank, and then what ends up happening is the tank is cold and that transfers to the animal. So glass basically gets as cold as it is outside. Whereas if you put them in a wooden enclosure or a plastic bin, the transfer of heat isn't really the same. Also, I don't know, my biggest argument for, let's say, keeping them in tubs is that in tubs, you're able to control the temperature, you're able to control the environment, and just because you have them in a tub doesn't mean you don't let them get out and exercise. So if you have your snake in a tub, in a decently sized tub for it, and then you take it outside and you let it exercise, you let it get its sunlight, and you interacting with it, it's not going to be really different than having it inside a larger enclosure where everything is actually a lot harder to keep. So, for instance, even just keeping something in my reptile room, if I keep anything in my reptile room, it'll be a lot easier for me to keep the conditions of the animal. Whereas if I set up a enclosure in my living room, so let's say I set up a big enclosure in my living room over here, but the living room gets a lot colder than my reptile room. So now all of a sudden I have a snake in a big enclosure in my living room, which is nice and beautiful, but keeping that ambient temperature right becomes very difficult. And the bigger home that you put your snake in, the harder it is to get those conditions. Unless, let's say, you live in Florida. You know, you live in Florida or down south, and you could build an enclosure outside and your snake would be fine in it. But if you're anywhere where it gets colder and you don't have the room temperature regulated, it actually ends up becoming a problem for a snake. So, plus, my wife doesn't like it, she says. So, if I put my snake in a big, beautiful enclosure in this living room, it would probably end up doing bad over time. And there's people that are doing this. Like, there's people that are doing it well, but then there's many more people that are actually doing it wrong. So it's like they'll give their animal a big enclosure, and then they'll use that, like, there's these like nature people where it's like, I'm going to set up this natural enclosure, I'm going to make it beautiful like nature, and I'm just going to kind of leave it alone and let it do its thing. I'm not going to bother with the snake. I'm not going to, you know, interact with it as much. I'm just going to let it be. And in doing that, if they get the enclosure temperatures right, if the temperature is right, if the humidity is right, if they get everything right, then that is good, at least for the health of the animal. But if you don't interact with it, it's never going to be as smart as a snake that's interacted with. So, because they'll go kind of along the lines of this: the snake needs stimulation, and it's going to go travel around. It's going to be stimulated. It's going to learn all these things. It's going to become smarter. But I argue that if you had your snake in a bin where it doesn't get all that excitement, like, you'd still give it a hide, give it something to kind of go up and down on, something for a little bit of exercise, but you take it out and interact with it, you're going to be able to teach that snake to be smarter and understand more than the snake that is in the jungle gym that doesn't have interaction. Like, if you take a snake that is not been interacted with, that hasn't been spent time with, it's not going to do this. It's not going to sit with you. It's not going to relax. It's not going to be calm. You're going to try and hold it, and every time you try and hold it, or every time you try and take it out, it's going to be running away. It's going to be like scared of you. And to me, like, if you want to take an animal and just put it in a container for viewing pleasure, then yeah, you might as well just leave it in the wild. I think that the greatest joy from keeping these animals is being able to interact with them. Like, you wouldn't take a dog, set up a room inside your house and say, this is the dog's room, and everything is perfect for it, and it's going to live a happy life in this room. You know, you take it for walks, you get to know it, it becomes your friend. And snakes are not capable, like, of love the way that a dog is, but they are intelligent, and you're still able to develop relationships with them. You're still able to, like, they know you over time, and they like you or they dislike you, or not even you in general. It's that they like and dislike things. So they'll enjoy being out. They'll enjoy, you know, if you take them outside and you let them go out and explore, they'll enjoy that. And you can even teach them to poop outside. So for instance, if I feed this snake and 6 days later I take it outside and let it go, it'll go to the washroom and it'll get into the habit of doing that. And it's something that you can actually teach your snakes. So it's not as simple as just, okay, if you keep it in this, this is going to be good for it. It's so much more complicated than that. Like, I'm gonna have some tea. Basically, my big argument is a snake kept in a bin that's interacted with, taken outside, and given real sunlight is going to do a lot better than a snake in a big enclosure with a UV lamp and all it needs that isn't really interacted with. But then even more so, yes, like, I'm not saying like big enclosures are bad. Big enclosures are great. And breeders keep snakes in smaller homes, and it's just, it makes things easier, it makes it cleaner. And that, another thing, if you have a snake inside a container that is kept clean versus you have it in an enclosure that has substrate that isn't cleaned properly, that's going to be worse. Now, if you're doing everything right, then you're going to be fine. And anyone that gets a snake off of me, I encourage them to give them a bigger home, to treat them more as if they're getting a dog, because in the reptile community, there is this like habit, and it just happens with people where they get more and more and more, and they put them in drawers. And for a breeder, it's kind of like a necessary evil. Because we can't have like giant enclosures for every animal. But for somebody buying it as a pet, they should give them the biggest home that they can give them. And think of it like a project. Think of just something where you can have fun and set up this enclosure and make it interactive and give them the ability to exercise. But you also have to make sure that you keep it really clean. And with substrate, that can be harder, especially depending on certain snakes. Like boas, ball pythons, they're pretty easy to clean up after. But if you take let's say you took a super dwarf reticulated python or a retic and you put it in an enclosure with substrate, they pee so much that you wouldn't be able to clean it properly. Because the pee just kind of spreads everywhere. So there's the two sides of everything. Like, substrate can hold humidity better, and it looks nicer, and it probably feels better for the snake, but you'll never hear of a snake that swallowed a bit of newspaper and died that way, whereas snakes can end up swallowing substrate when they're eating, and it can get stuck in their body, and it could, like, stab them in the mouth or face or something, where that would never happen with newspaper. And then also just understanding that if you keep humidity from spraying and wetting versus actually having humidity proper in the air, there's a big difference between that too. Think about your lips. When you lick your lips, they get wet and that dries them. It doesn't actually keep them like moist and humid for the day. It's just a quick fix. So when you spray a reptile tank and you get it all wet, that is like a lot of humidity, but then it goes away pretty quickly. Whereas if you're able to maintain your humidity with the humidifier and actually have the air at the right humidity, that's going to be a lot better for the animal than the constant like too humid to too dry and going back and forth all the time. And when people buy snakes, the number one thing that you usually see is you see them buying tanks. Hi, famous jester. I have been bitten by snakes quite a bit, but it's never been really that bad. If you look at my hands, you can't see any scars. But basically, if you, I like to kind of use the example of a cat all the time. If you take a cat and you startle it, if you go and you grab a cat from behind, or you're really quick, the cat will turn around and bite you or scratch you. Most people have been bitten by or scratched by a cat, and snakes are very similar to cats in that way. Like if you're nice and gentle, like she's never going to just bite me. If I was to like maybe way too quickly go at her face, or grab her when she's sleeping really quickly and not kind of like say, hey, I'm gonna come pick you up or whatever, then she might react, because they are very instinctive, and in nature they sit there kind of quietly, and they'll wait, and they'll smell where their prey has been, so they can kind of tell the trail, like there's been a rabbit here or there's been a rat here, and they'll kind of sit on that trail and hide and wait till the animal comes back, and when the animal comes back, then bam, they'll bite it. So they're very kind of twitch reactive in that way, but there's nothing in a snake that's like nasty the way that they're portrayed in in movies and stuff. Like they're not out there, I'm gonna bite you. Anytime that they're in the biting mode, it's usually one of two things. Either they smell food, so if they smell rodents, it turns on their feeding response, and it's very much like a shark with blood. If there's blood in the water with sharks, they go nuts. So if there's the smell of a rodent and the snake is around, it's like it turns on, it goes, there's food in the area. Like they get like perked up, and they're ready to come and attack and get some food. So like when there's food around, and then the other time that they might get like that a little bit is if you're there and you're scaring them. Like think of how big I am compared to the snake. So many people are scared of snakes, and if they're poisonous, then sure. But if they're not, like, look at how big I am compared to the snake. The snake has much more reason to be afraid of me than I have to be afraid of it. So for it to feel comfortable with me, we've had to develop trust with each other. And this snake trusts me because I've had it since it's fit inside my hand. I've literally raised this snake from the time she was born. So there's nothing in her that's scared of me. I'm the bringer of good things. I give her food, and she's never bit me. And about 95% of my snakes have never bit me. But I have two snakes that are, one that's a bit scared, and the other one that is just a little bit crazy. Like, every snake has their own personality, and most of them are like pretty calm and sweet, but some of them are a little high-strung. So I have a snake, Calypso, and Calypso... yeah, like, if I open up Calypso's home, she'll come out at me. And you have to be able to know kind of how to deal with that, or you don't want a snake like that. Calypso is not a good snake to have as a pet. But most of them are wonderful and sweet, nice and calming. Like, actually having the snake with you it's relaxing, it's nice, and she's just chilling out. She's like, you're nice and warm, I'll just stay here and hang out with you. But she's that whole fear thing, there's a reason to be fearful maybe of, back to the wolf and the dog. If you see a dog, you're not going to be as scared as if you see a wolf. And snakes that are born in captivity and taken care of properly end up behaving like dogs in the way that they're not. This is not a wild animal anymore. At least, like, I don't believe that it's a wild animal. It's an exotic animal, but it doesn't behave the way the same animal in the wild would. It's very calm and relaxed. So it's totally different. And that goes back to, like, it's not as simple as, one enclosure is better than the other. It's not as simple as just like snakes are mean. Maybe some snakes are scared, some snakes are wild, and some snakes are not. So you look at the same animal in different environments, in different situations. Let's say that this snake was never handled, and somebody raised it, never interacted with it, just fed it, and was really like a striky animal. That would probably never change because they put into time and developed that relationship with it. So in the same way, the enclosure that you keep your animal in is not even close to as important as the time that you spend with the animal, as the time that you spend cleaning the enclosure. So a big enclosure that's not kept clean is worse than a small enclosure that is kept clean. So I always think that it's kind of good to start off with something like smaller and easy to manage, and once you get all the settings perfect, because it's a lot easier to get your environment perfect in a smaller enclosure, then make it a little bit bigger. And then once again, you go through that process of getting the settings right, and then do it again, and you can keep upgrading and getting better at setting up enclosures. But one of the biggest mistakes that new people make coming into the hobby is they'll end up getting these big enclosures for their tiny snakes, and it's not set up properly. It doesn't have the right humidity, and that's usually the biggest problem that people don't realize, that the humidity is wrong, and then their little snake ends up just drying out. Or having like terrible sheds. If your snake isn't shedding properly, like in one piece, and it's not doing it easily, then your environment is not good. No, I have leopard geckos, crested geckos, pictus geckos.
Meet me at Spadina at 6.
At 6?
Yeah.
Aren't you done at 6?
Well, I'm gonna probably be like half an hour late, so I have to stay till 5:30. I'm done at 5.
Oh, okay.
But Matthew,
What, Mama?
I expect you to keep the house neat. It's not that much to ask. I spent 2 hours cleaning it. Just keep it clean. Make a bloody mess. It's not that hard.
I make a mess? Mama.
Pasta, there's curry.
Okay, thank you. So, with the thoughts. From all the geckos I've kept, I actually think that leopard geckos are the best pet geckos. These guys are cool, but as they get bigger, their nails kind of hurt a little. Like, so when they're holding on to you, they scratch you. They're... No. You go get it. No. Are they better? Actually, I think... I don't know. It's weird because they get big. I find these better than Cresties because they eat well. Sometimes Cresties, they don't want to eat properly. And it's just... I don't like that. I like animals that, like, eat properly. Well, like, these guys can have more attitudes. Like if he's in a bad mood and I try to take him... Oh, he just drank a pile of water. He drank a pile of water. So it's like... I don't know. Whenever I take him out, I bring him to the sink and I let him drink a pile of water, and it's like he stores it in his mouth. It seems to not like go down right away. So if you take even snakes, if you take snakes and pick them up right after they've been drinking from the water, sometimes a whole pile of water will leak out their mouth. I think that when they drink, they kind of store it in their mouth for a bit before they let it go down. So it's just water. But with John, basically, these guys, they're pretty good eaters. They can be a little bit sassy. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to breed them. I think I just like Leroy. I never really liked Leachianus geckos. I thought they're kind of like ugly. But I really like Leroy because he's like super bright. He's just bright and beautiful. But he's got whoa! Yeah, he's just dripping a bit of water. Drank a little bit too much water. But I find leopard geckos are the most interactive. Like, this guy will hang out with me, he'll chill, but he doesn't really do much. He's not really, he'll just hang out on your shoulder, he'll hang out on you. But leopard geckos are a lot more interactive. Like, you can take a leopard gecko and teach them to kind of come to you. They'll come to you for food. I have friends that have like leopard geckos where they'll call them by their name and the gecko will come and hang out with them. I've never really seen that much with these guys. Like, they definitely see you and know like you're there. Like, he's really funny because it's like, I'll see him in his home and he'll see me and I'll walk by his home and he'll kind of just be there like, and then I'll go out of the room and I'll come back and he'll have disappeared. So it's really funny because it's like when you see him, he'll just kind of like, he'll freeze. He'll be like, ah, you saw me. But he won't like run away. But then you leave for just a bit and then he'll run away and hide. It's like they're shy or like they just see you and they know. He sees me. I'm not going to move. I'm going to stay still and nothing's going to happen. But leopard geckos are actually, I think leopard geckos are smarter. I think these guys are just more expensive because they're rare. They're harder to find, and they're really cool animals, and they're not that hard to take care of. But they're just, you're boring. He's nice to look at, but he's just boring. Sorry, Leroy, you're boring. And I don't know, I've heard also that some of them are really loud and noisy at night, like they creak a lot. He doesn't really speak much. He rarely speaks. The only thing that like he does sometimes is I'll try and get him and he'll like, leave me alone. But that's the most excitement I'll get out of him. And then once he's out, he's just very chill, right? You're very chill. But I'm fortunate that he's not a nasty one, I guess, because some people have, like, really nasty Leachianus, so. But once again, I've raised him since he's basically a baby, so. Oh, there we go. Are we gonna poop? So there we go. He pooped on. Well, he didn't poop on me. I knew he'd poop. So that's the thing. If you know your animals, if you watch them and you spend enough time with them, you know. I don't like blood pythons. I heard they're really smart. I've heard they're really smart, and they're some people's like favorite animals to keep. But I've always found them to be kind of ugly and like big chubby snakes that have giant dumps, so they haven't really been appealing to me. You gonna bite my ear? You better not bite my ear. No. I've already got into too many animals. I got more animals than I should, and now I'm downsizing. But like, I don't keep any animals that I don't like. Like, I'm not gonna, like, let's say like hognose snakes. Hognose snakes are super popular. People like them, and if I bred them, I could probably make money off of it, but it's just like I don't care. I don't really want to work with any animals that I don't find attractive. Same thing with every one of my animals. Every snake that I bought, like I went to a show and I picked out the prettiest one that I could afford, and that's kind of how I grew my collection. Or I rescued, so I've rescued some animals. Yeah, I have some SDs. I have a new little one that's pretty fun. I'll show you Prince. I'll be right back. I'm gonna put this guy away because he's causing trouble. You causing trouble? Come on. Come on. Say bye, Leroy. Goodbye. SDs feel amazing. Like their skin just feels like silk. And they're smart. Like these guys are very smart. But they're also crazy. They're smart and crazy. Oh, you don't like blood? Yeah, I don't like them either, so. Well, like I wouldn't mind, like, I think I would like to meet, like, someone that works with them a lot and be able to kind of spend time with them and see what they're actually like. Because I have friends that basically say that their blood pythons are, like, smarter. They say they're smarter than retics, so it would be interesting. But just, like, when they get bigger, they got big heads, so they could give you a nice nasty bite. And they also just, they take giant poops. No! You're in a funny mood today. But see, from the time that the snakes are little, I play with their faces a lot. So I touch them in the face, and I hold their face, and that calms them down. I'm really starting to like Florida king snakes quite a bit too. I think that a lot of the colubrids are smarter than people think. Like king snakes and rat snakes, they're really smart. But the other thing is that they're actually stinky. Like a rat snake smells with their like poo and pee a lot more than a boa does. So it's just kind of weird that like these little snakes will like be kind of stinky. Whereas the big snakes, like boas, I never feel like boas really make the place smell that terrible. And SDs pee a lot. That's the other thing. Like, they don't, like with boas, you get like a crap of pee maybe once a week. With these guys, they pee a lot. They pee probably 2-3 times a week. So that's one thing that I don't really like about these guys. You're more work because you're peeing all the time. Well, that was dramatic. Yeah. So now I only do the stream on Sundays on Facebook. I'm on YouTube because they're not that busy, as you can see, right? So when I'm cleaning, I do stream quite a bit on TikTok. So if you ever want to check out the TikTok, it's just my name, Matthew Genzer, and if you put that into TikTok, you'll find me. And I mostly stream on TikTok when I'm cleaning now, so you can catch me while I'm cleaning, ask whatever questions, hang out, see some animals. But I do stream usually when I'm cleaning. I just don't put it on YouTube because if you have videos, like if you have big videos and you stick them on YouTube and people don't watch them, it hurts your channel. So I just do all the streaming on TikTok.